We all know the legend of how Davy Crockett died, a folk hero making a final heroic last stand at the Alamo. His story is etched into the very mythology of America. But that mythology almost completely ignores the living, breathing legacy he left behind. What happens to 6 children raised on the unforgiving 19th century frontier who must first endure their own mother's sudden and tragic death at just 27? And then, just as they've adjusted to a new blended family, they must grapple with the news that their larger-than-life father has become a national martyr hundreds of miles away in Texas. This isn't a simple footnote in a history book. It's a profound question about family survival and identity. Did his overwhelming fame, the king of the wild frontier, cast an impossible shadow for them to escape? Or did the same blood of resilience, adventure, and grit that ran through his veins forge them into something just as remarkable? The untold story of the Crockett children is a surprising and deeply human saga of survival, political ambition, and frontier endurance that proves the legend of the Alamo was only the end of one chapter, not the end of the story. Let's see what became of each of these first 3 Crockett children. Number 6, John Wesley Crockett. Born in 1807 in Tennessee, Davy himself had little formal schooling, but he wanted John to get an education. And John indeed did well in school. He studied law and married Martha Hamilton, eventually fathering 14 children, a frontier-sized family. In 1837, just a year after his father's death, John entered politics and won election to the U.S. House of Representatives, representing the same Tennessee district his father once had. In fact, he even succeeded the very man who had defeated Davy in the 1835 election. Living in the shadow of a frontier hero wasn't easy, but John managed to craft his own legacy. John served 2 terms in Congress, 1837 to 1841, as a member of the Whig Party, effectively stepping into his father's political shoes. For John, the battles he fought were political ones in the halls of Congress rather than on the wild frontier. In early 1836, the news of his father's death at the Alamo must have hit John hard, but it also steeled his resolve to uphold the Crockett name. After his stint in Congress, John returned to Tennessee and was appointed as a district attorney general for a couple of years. Ever restless, he later moved his large family to New Orleans, where he tried his hand at business and even ran a newspaper called The Crescent. In the early 1850s, he moved back to Tennessee, settling in Memphis. There, John Wesley Crockett died in 1852 at the age of 45. Number 5. William Finley Crockett, born in 1809, was Davy's second son. In March 1830, at the age of 20, he married Clorinda Clarissa Boyette in Gibson County, Tennessee. William and Clorinda started a family and eventually had several children, at least 5. Rather than pursuing politics like his brother William, lived the life of a farmer and pioneer. While other members of the Crockett family would eventually head to Texas, William chose a different path. In the early 1840s, he boldly moved his young family west to the frontier of Arkansas, settling on a bluff by the White River. It was remote wild country, dense forests along the river teeming with fish and game. William built a log cabin and farmed the land, truly carving out a home in this frontier. Arkansas had only just become a state in 1836. So when William arrived around 1842, it was still a raw, sparsely populated frontier. William built a home in what was then wilderness. The area would later be named Crockett's Bluff in his honor, a testament to the mark he left there. Sadly, William's life was cut short. He died in January 1846 at only 36 years old, likely due to illness or an accident. He was buried in Arkansas, and his passing left Clorinda a widow with their children. By 1848, William's widow Clorinda and her new husband even established a post office at Crockett's Bluff, literally putting the Crockett name on the map of Arkansas. Number 4. Margaret Finley Polly Crockett. Born in 1812, she was the only daughter of Davy's first marriage, and she was just 3 years old when her mother died. Margaret, nicknamed Polly after her mother, grew up under the care of her father and stepmother Elizabeth. In 1830, 17-year-old Margaret married Y. Flowers in Gibson County, Tennessee, with her father's blessing. The young couple soon started a family of their own, raising several children in the vicinity of the Crockett homestead. In January 1836, as Davy Crockett headed off to Texas, he wrote a heartfelt letter to Margaret and Y. In it, he said he hoped to make a fortune yet for myself and family, and urged them to do their best while he was away. Tragically, that would be his final message to his children. One can imagine Margaret reading those loving words over and over, taking comfort in her father's voice on the page. That year, 1836, would bring unimaginable heartache for Margaret. First came that hopeful letter, then soon after the shattering news that her father was gone forever. After her father's death at the Alamo, Margaret continued her quiet life in Tennessee, cherishing that last letter. She spent her days caring for her home and family, churning butter, cooking over a wood fire, sewing clothes, and teaching her little ones. It was a humble, hard-working life. She never moved to Texas like some of her family. She stayed in Tennessee, raising her children. Margaret Crockett Flowers died in 1860 in her late 40s. Y and Margaret must have leaned on each other for strength when they heard the terrible news about her father. Children with Elizabeth Patton. After Polly Finley's death, Davy Crockett found love again with Elizabeth Patton, whom he married in 1815. Elizabeth was a widow, with 2 children of her own, so when she and Davy married, the family instantly grew. Davy treated his stepchildren as if they were his own. And then together, he and Elizabeth had 3 more children, Robert, Rebecca, and Matilda. These younger Crockett children grew up in a relatively stable home in Tennessee, at least compared to their older siblings. They had a mother figure present. Still, they were quite young when their father left for Texas and never returned. Let's follow the lives of Robert, Rebecca, and Matilda, the children from Crockett's second marriage. Number 3. Robert Patton Crockett, born in 1816, was the first child of Davy and Elizabeth. At age 19, when his father died at the Alamo, Robert resolved to continue his father's fight. After word of the Alamo tragedy reached Tennessee, Robert was stirred to action. He traveled to Texas and joined the Texan Army, fighting under General Sam Houston at the Battle of San Jacinto in April 1836. The victory that secured Texas's independence. In a sense, Robert helped finish what his father started. After Texas won independence, Robert returned to Tennessee. He married Matilda Porter in 1839, and they had a large family of 9 children. In 1854, Robert led a major move for the Crockett clan. He relocated his family along with his aging mother Elizabeth and sister Rebecca's family to Texas. Texas had granted land to Crockett's heirs in honor of Davy's service, and Robert seized this chance to build a new life on that frontier land near Acton, Texas. Robert spent the rest of his life farming in Texas and carrying on the family legacy. On their Texas homestead, Robert's family lived in a simple log cabin and worked the soil much like other pioneer families. They faced harsh summers and sometimes hostile elements, but they also had the pride of building a new life on land earned by Davy's sacrifice. His wife Matilda passed away after some years, and he remarried twice in later life. Robert lived to the age of 73. In 1889, he died after being thrown from a wagon and breaking his hip. A sudden end for a tough pioneer. Number 2. Rebecca Alvarado Crockett, born in 1818, was the elder daughter of Davy and Elizabeth. She was only 18 years old when her father died at the Alamo, a heartbreaking loss that marked her youth. In 1839, at about 21, she married George Kimbrough in Tennessee. The couple had 3 children before tragedy struck. George died in 1846, leaving Rebecca a widow in her late 20s. She later found love again and married James Halford, with whom she had 3 more children. In 1854, Rebecca joined her brother Robert and their mother in moving to Texas. The journey to Texas was long and arduous. Likely weeks of bumping along in wagons, but Rebecca was as tough as anyone determined to start anew. She and her family settled near other Crockett relatives in Acton, Texas. Her mother, Elizabeth, was with her in Texas until 1860, which surely gave Rebecca comfort and help in those early Texas years. Rebecca lived out her days there on the Texas frontier. She died in 1879 at around 60 years old. Number 1, Matilda Crockett, born in 1821, was the youngest of Davy's children, only 14. When her father departed for Texas, Matilda watched him right away and later recalled that he wore a skinning cap the day he left. Little did she know that within a few months, the family would receive word that Davy had been killed. A crushing blow for the teenaged Matilda. That poignant detail from Matilda helped cement the iconic image of her father in American lore. It was the last time she ever saw him. Matilda grew up and married Thomas P. Tyson as a young woman. After Thomas's death, she married James Wilson and later Reen Fields. Across her 3 marriages, Matilda had 7 children. Unlike many of her siblings, Matilda never moved to Texas. She remained in Tennessee her entire life. She lived through the Civil War era in Tennessee and witnessed her father's legend grow over the years. By the time Matilda was an old woman in 1890, the world had changed drastically from her frontier girlhood. Railroads crossed the land where wagons once rolled, and the United States had been through a civil war and reconstruction. Matilda outlived all her brothers and sisters, becoming the last surviving Crockett child. She died in 1890 at the age of 68 in Tennessee. Matilda's long life lived in the same hills where she was born, meant that a piece of Davy Crockett's legacy stayed in Tennessee right into the twilight of the 19th century. So how did Davy Crockett's legacy, his grit adventure and resilience manifest in the 6 children who grew up in his shadow? The answer isn't found in one path, but in 6 separate ones. It was in John Wesley, who bravely stepped into his father's political arena and inherited his very seat in Congress. It was in William, who took that raw pioneer spirit into the wilds of Arkansas and left his name on the map. It was in Robert Patton, who turned grief into action, taking up arms to help finish the fight his father had started in Texas. And it was in Rebecca, who showed the resilience of a frontierswoman enduring personal loss and an arduous journey to build a new home on that same Texas soil. Even in stillness, it was there. It was in Margaret and Matilda, who chose to remain in Tennessee, becoming the keepers of memory, one treasuring a final letter, the other providing the final image of the coonskin cap. There may have been only one king of the wild frontier, but the story of his 6 children proves that his true legacy wasn't a myth. It was an unkillable bloodline of resilience.